Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you locally by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today. Caesars.com. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com is here, as he is on Tuesdays, for Football at 4. As we look at the Eagles' loss one last time to the Los Angeles Chargers. Andrew, let's start off with, would you at the end of the day, would you say this is a disappointing loss by Philadelphia?
Well, anytime you lose a game is obviously going to be disappointing, but you have to look and see the positives in that game, Mike, and I thought that they showed tremendous growth in certain aspects of their game, certain areas that they needed to improve that were really glaring deficiencies earlier in the season. But there's still some troubling trends that you're seeing with on the defensive side of the ball that need to get ironed out, even with a favorable slate of games coming up.
All right. Yes, 84% passing completion, fifth quarterback who's gone over 80%. Why is this continuously happening to this defense?
Well, it's with the good quarterbacks, if you notice. All five of those quarterbacks are on the upper echelon in the NFL, but that's obviously no excuse. I mean, quarterbacks are sitting back and they're dissecting the Eagles' secondary, and they're taking advantage of the ineptitude of the linebacker position. And also, Mike, they're not getting any pressure from their front four, which going into the season, many depicted that group to be one of the best in football. I think you're starting to see that they need to sort of find a way to invigorate that group in the offseason and add some young talent in there with some of their high draft picks, because they're just not getting enough production pressure outside of Javon Hargrave, who, by the way, has not had a sack since Week 5 in Carolina.
Yep, I mentioned that earlier. I'm glad you brought that up because I want to get into that in just a little bit. But as you wrote about, a lot of people are going after Jonathan Gannon. Fair or unfair? You said he made adjustments. They did change some looks. They did do some things. So is this a coaching issue, or do they have a personnel problem?
I think it's a little bit of both, Mike, because these losses have really shown what a difference a few months make, right? I mean, going into the season, many thought that they got some value signings in Anthony Harris, who only 2 years ago led the NFL in interceptions, getting a guy like Steve Nelson, who has been a competent player everywhere he's gone. So you pairing him with Darius Slay, you have one of the better cornerback tandems that the Eagles have had in probably a decade. And Alex Singleton was looked at as a player that was a terrific find, and you thought that he was going to carry his momentum from last season over. So little adjustments, Mike, in personnel-wise, but many thought that the defense was going to be at least a little bit more formidable and giving Jonathan Gannon some pieces to work with. However, over the past couple of months, you started to see the glaring inefficiency from the linebacker position, no matter how they decide to dress it up. Obviously, now they're seeing a little bit more production with putting T.J. Edwards and Davion Taylor there. The back end, to me, is a little puzzling because you do have a lot of veteran players back there, and they've all played a lot of football, and they're not as bad as what they're showing or what the stats would indicate. I mean, these guys have played a lot of football. So Jonathan Gannon, in my opinion, has got to find a way to maximize the players that he has, because this is a winnable defense based on personnel, what they have, Mike. Obviously, the linebacker position is less than ideal, but to be able to just to sit back there and have and provide such little resistance for these quarterbacks, I mean, I can't help but look at Jonathan Gannon and say, I mean, you have to figure out a way to utilize some of your players better.
Now, he spoke just a little while ago, and he said, this isn't an alarming. He said it's definitely fixable. I wouldn't say it's alarming. Do you look at this and say it's fixable? Because it appears that he tried to do something. He blitzed more. I think they blitzed about 19% of the time. He changed his coverages a little bit. So is this fixable with what he has?
No, not this season anyway. Not 9 games into the season. If you haven't been able to correct the issues and the flaws, it's probably not going to happen this year. And that's just looking at it realistically, right? I mean, you have the personnel that you have. You're not going to. There aren't any reinforcements out there that you can throw into your lineup, and it's going to all of a sudden allow him to call things differently and give him a little bit more flexibility in his disguises and things of that nature. I mean, this is what he has to work with, but he's a defensive coordinator, Mike. This is his job to assess what he has and figure out a way to maximize the talent on that roster.
The talent on that roster, obviously, as you mentioned, Slay, Nelson, he was asked today, hey, that what's the apprehension with playing more press man? And he said, yeah, we do play press man a little. Should they be doing more? Would you put more on the plate of Slay and Nelson?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to at this point. I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, obviously his whole philosophy is preventing the big explosive play. But, I mean, you have to – once you see a quarterback stand back there and complete 84.2% of his passes, you have to look at it and say, okay, you know what? We're going to have to ramp things up here, apply a little bit more pressure with my corners, and take that risk and find a way to manufacture some sort of pressure and get quarterbacks rattled, get them off their spot, and make them hurry a little bit. I mean, it's far easier to stomach that if they're able to complete that with pressure than standing back there with little to no resistance, unrattled, and being able to assess the field, work through all your progressions, and you sort of just march your way down the field on that defense.
Now, he was asked today, he said, it's not a stretch to say personnel-wise that your D-line is the strength of your group. Obviously, he's going to say they're playing well, but you mentioned Hargrave. How is the defensive line playing, and how is that affecting the way that Gannon calls his defense?
Well, they're not generating any pressure. I mean, you look at 3 out of the last 4 weeks, the defense has not produced a sack. They look like all-world players against the Detroit Lions when they had 6 sacks and 12 quarterback hits. Well, they had 1 quarterback hit on Sunday, and that was from cornerback Steven Nelson. The defensive line, they just don't have I've been saying this for probably a year now. Josh Sweat is a rotational third defensive end that you do not want to see out there for a number of snaps because it tends to water down his efficiency and wear him down late in games. Obviously, he left the game early on Sunday, but he hasn't really been the player that they envisioned with giving him that extension. Derek Barnett is what he is at this point. He's not someone that you can really reliably count on. And Ryan Kerrigan's been a non-factor, and you have a young player in Teron Jackson that I think is going to factor into the equation a little bit more as we get deeper into the season once they realize that Ryan Kerrigan's not really going to be a long-term fixture here. And your defensive tackle has just been Javon Hargrave. And there hasn't been any sort of he hasn't really found that other 2 or 3 guys that are going to be consistently providing pressure on quarterbacks.
A lot of the fans, Andrew, will say they need to blitz more. Is that an answer to you? Obviously, the fans are going to say blitz, blitz, blitz. I mean, Jim Johnson screwed every defensive coordinator in this town for a long time because he blitzed a lot. Now everybody wants to follow that blueprint. You got to blitz, you got to blitz, you got to blitz. Is that the remedy for this defense?
Well, I mean, he blitzed more on Sunday than he has all season, so he is trying that in Jonathan Gannon's defense. Now, I would even do it more so, and I would have liked to have seen him do that later in the game, especially on that final drive when Justin Herbert has just proven to march his way down the field. You have to try something, throw the kitchen sink at him, do something to sort of stunt their progress. And I think now you have to do it even more so because whatever he's doing is not working. So you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what you need to do to make quarterbacks uncomfortable back there. And I think that starts with implementing a blitz at a higher frequency.
Talk with Andrew DiCecco, football at 4 here on the Sports Bash from the Inside the Birds podcast. Eagles lose to the Chargers. Looking back at some of the defense, because John Gannon did speak today. He was asked about Hargrave, and he said, he was asked, he had 6 sacks in the first couple games. He hasn't had any since. You brought that up as well. He was asked if they're playing him differently, and he said, yeah, teams are playing him a little differently. But overall, our team, is that the thing? Is Hargrave just being played differently? Have they figured him out a little bit? Because I think he's an interesting guy. He's 28. He's got 1 more year left on his deal. And you're kind of wondering, is he kind of the centerpiece of our next defensive group? Or, how do you view him?
To answer the first part of your question, I think he's just simply, when you're producing like that, you're going to command more attention from offensive linemen, that was the role that Fletcher Cox held for over probably the last 8 to 10 years. So now when you're producing, you're going to get more attention. Now, do I see him as a long-term fixture on that defense? No, and I think that's why it's so important to get Milton Williams more snaps, because I do think that they envision him being a starter at the defensive tackle spot. Granted, he also has seen some snaps at the end spot, and they need to see what they have with some of their younger defensive linemen, Marwan Tuipulotu and Teron Jackson as well. But I think right now, you got to remember, Fletcher Cox and Hargrave are getting a little bit longer in the tooth. They both have a very high price tag. So moving forward, when you're looking to revamp a roster, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, and possibly you're getting older on the offensive line, you have to start making changes somewhere. And I think when you look at the price tag that both he and Fletcher Cox command right now, I think you need to sort of plan on transitioning away from them.
Hey, you mentioned, and so did Gannon, that there's more attention to Hargrave. So shouldn't that be opening up other players to have less attention? I guess Fletcher Cox. And is that signifying that maybe Fletcher Cox is starting to hit the downward portion of his career?
I think Fletcher Cox is someone that's commanded double teams for the entirety of his career, and I think he's played a lot of snaps. There hasn't been a lot of guys next to him. You look at Tim Jernigan, they brought him in to be someone that could be a sidekick and take some of that pressure off of him. He was hurt for most of his time here. There was constantly a revolving door of players around him, and I think that forced the Eagles to give him a lot more snaps than they wanted to over the past, 3, 4, 5 years. And I think that's just a product of the player getting older and a little bit of wear and tear and tread on the tires. But he's still an effective player. I just think that it's up to Jonathan Gannon to figure out a way to maximize it. And when you're reading between the lines of some of the comments you're hearing after the game from guys like Fletcher Cox and even Javon Hargrave last week when he said, "I'm not the defensive coordinator." You can't help but wonder if if those two guys are saying that, you have to wonder how many other players feel differently, feel a certain way about his scheme. And I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, that's not good. I want to flip to offense. Steichen speaks today. I don't know how much he factors into the offense at all, but what did you think of the game plan? Because we've been very critical, certainly myself, of Sirianni's play calling and game plans. Now, I'm not asking for 40 rushes a game, but I'm glad that he has learned that, hey, this might be who we are. So what did you think of the game plan? Was it a game plan that gave them a chance to win?
Yeah, it did. They opened the game with a 3-yard carry from Boston Scott. And then on the second series, they got away from it. Obviously, they were backed up on their own 1-yard line. But that whole drive stalled on that deep throw to Quez Watkins. That's not a high percentage pass. I thought that they should have lined up under center, pound the ball with Jordan Howard, get them some breathing room. And obviously, the drive ended with a 3-yard carry from Jalen Hurts on 3rd and 10. But after that, Mike, you started to see them really lean on the running game. And Jalen Hurts, outside of a couple misses on his throws, I thought that he really made the proper reads, threw with anticipation, threw with accuracy. You're starting to see that connection with Devontae Smith rekindled, which is encouraging. Yes, he only completed 11 passes out of 17 attempts, but I thought he moved the offense efficiently. And I think if the offense had gotten the ball back at the end of that game, I think they score and tie it up.
I guess the follow-up to that question really becomes, is that their identity? Is that who they need to be? They got a schedule coming up that has a lot of winnable games. If they go in with that game plan you can't run the ball 40 times, but if you say, hey, our identity is we want to run the ball first and then play off of that, is that a formula for them to win some games?
Yeah, it is. Especially you have to do that to keep defenses honest, but you also have to look at the Chargers were one of the worst run defenses in football, and you need to take advantage of that and exploit that and not put so much pressure on your young quarterback. By leaning on the running game, you're getting a number of different guys into the presenting matchup issues with Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott and Jordan Howard, but you're also allowing Jalen Hurts the game to slow down for him a little bit, a chance for him to really instead of pressing, he's able to make the proper throws, and he's not having to shoulder the entire offense. It's a big ask for a young player, and I think being able to go to the run game has allowed him to take a step back.
Yeah, and my follow-up, I guess, was going to be, is the running thing more that, hey, this is what we're good at, or B, that are they telling us that they don't have as much trust in the quarterback as maybe they want to?
I think the second part, your second part of your question would be the flashy answer, but I think it's more so you have to go when you go back to the drawing board and you see what do we need to do to establish a rhythm on the offense. Well, it's running the football. You have a number of running backs. Well, let's use them. And then all of a sudden you're starting to get churn out these first downs, and your quarterbacks, you're not doing these 3 and outs, and your quarterback's being able to make the proper throws. And I think it's just a much more balanced approach. And I think that's more so the coaching staff having to hit rock bottom against the Raiders to really be like, okay, what do we need to do? And I think they really started to commit to the running game and alleviate some of the pressure from Jalen. And I think it's been a good balance and a good marriage there. Now you're going into next week. Vic Fangio is a tremendous defensive coordinator, so he's going to try and take away the running game and make Jalen Hurts beat him with his arm. So that's something that the Eagles are going to have to prepare for. But going into this week, I think they found a winning recipe. Now it's all of a sudden can the defense play complementary football to kind of find that balance.
Yeah, and I know that it's going to be interesting when Miles Sanders is back and then Jordan Howard, that whole situation. You really have 4 guys who could have a role in this offense, but you don't have enough touches for all 4 guys, right?
Right. But I think that some of these guys can.
Yeah, we lost Andrew. He just kind of vanished out of. Oh, there he goes. There we are. We lost you for a second.
How often do you see a running back who rushed for over 1,000 yards twice on the practice squad like that? The Eagles are very fortunate that a team did not pilfer Jordan Howard from the practice squad. I think he needs to be a permanent fixture on the offense. And then you have Kenny Gainwell, who can be the receiving option, and Boston Scott's a good changeup, and you have Miles Sanders. So I think that there is a role for all these guys. If you look at it on offense, they always have Dallas in the passing game. They always have Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith that are prominent fixtures. So there's not a whole lot there. So I think you have to lead on your running game and utilize Kenny Gainwell as an extension of that as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting what they do with Sanders more than anything when he comes back. Does he just kind of get the carries? Do they mix him in? You just mentioned it. I agree. Howard, to me, has a role on this team. Does Scott get pushed out a little bit? I think that'll be the interesting part about it because it's evident to me that Howard has really added. Scott's done a really nice job, too. Both of those guys have done a good job. But guess what? They've both been given the chance to get into a rhythm, something that Miles Sanders really hasn't been given the chance for. You mentioned the weapons. Smith had his best game, but what about the other 2 guys? What are we seeing about the other guys, Rieger and Watkins, now through 9 games?
Yeah, and that's a fair question. And I think that Jalen Reagor is someone that I think should be sort of phased out of the offense. He's not really effective, and they don't really know how to use him. They used him, in my opinion, well against the Lions, but then they got away from that this week. If you're having to utilize a first-round wide receiver, if the best way to utilize him is on jet sweeps and end arounds and little gadget plays, then you have a big problem there, obviously. And Quez Watkins is being shoehorned into that second receiver spot, but on most teams, Mike, he's frankly going to be a number 3 wide receiver. I mentioned on your show last week that I don't think he's going to be a volume guy. I think he's going to be a 3-4 catch a game guy. But I don't know that he's limited to just the deep ball. I think he can affect the intermediate levels of the field. But he's someone that Devontae Smith needs a complementary piece, a competent player across from him that's going to command targets. And that's not Quez Watkins, and that's certainly not Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, I know the Watkins thing. He was asked today about it because I guess, why is Watkins a receiver on 13 personnel? And Steichen's answer was, we really mix it up. It could be anybody. But, if you're going to run the football, it seems that Watkins would almost be frivolous to be on the field unless you're going to play action and use him down to try to catch somebody snapping.
Yeah, that would be the only reason. And Quez Watkins is an interesting player because there was so much hype surrounding him going into the season. But, if you watch the player in college, or if you really look at his body type and sort of his skill set, he was never going to be a wide receiver 2 in an offense. I mean, he was going to be a complementary piece, an effective one at that, but someone that you can sort of throw in there and he's going to get you a home run play, but not someone that's really meant to be out there shouldering all those snaps. I mean, opposite a player like Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith right now needs a veteran player opposite him to sort of maximize his ability.
Now, obviously the Eagles are in a situation, Andrew, where they have multiple draft picks, possibly 3. So, is it a better decision in this year's draft to use the 3 picks, add defense, and fix your defense, or utilize those picks to go get a veteran quarterback, a Russell Wilson, get back into the Deshaun Watson, or maybe somebody else? Do you hold on to the picks, fix your defense? Do you draft a quarterback? How do you play that in your mind with where this team kind of is stuck right now?
In order to build a team the right way, Mike, you have to keep your picks and build the defense. If you look at it right now, they are fundamentally flawed. They don't have a lot of young players to hang their hat on. There's going to be some really, really top-end pass rushers at the top of this draft. And, I mean, there's that safety Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, who I like a lot. There's a lot of players that can really step in as rookies and help that unit. I don't see what adding a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson will do if your defense is going to continuously surrender yards and be able to let a quarterback dissect them over and over again. You're asking a quarterback to really give them a chance that's going to have to put up 35 points a game. I don't think that they're in position right now to contend. So adding a veteran wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. I think they need to start to add a lot of young building blocks on the defensive side of the ball and start to build it the right way.
Well, you just said something that's interesting, that there is a lot of defensive talent in this year's draft, and you could possibly get 2, maybe 3 of those guys if you have 3 picks in the top 20.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a player on each level. I mean, really, there's Stingley, the cornerback. There's Aiden Hutchinson, the pass rusher from Michigan. There's a lot of players that they can really grab that are going to make an immediate impact, and guys that are going to be able to be big-time playmakers for this football team for the foreseeable future. So dealing away these picks while they have such an opportune spot to invigorate the roster with young talent would be malpractice, in my opinion.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Eagles lose. They fall to 3-6. They'll play Denver this week. We'll start to look ahead to the Broncos, who just Rochambeau'd Dallas on Sunday. So they're coming off a big road win. And Andrew will be back on Thursday to kind of give us the matchups that he's looking for in that one. And that will be on Thursday's edition of Football at 4. All right, Andrew, take care, man.
You too, Mike. Talk to you soon.
All right, there's Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds powers Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live. You can hear Jeff Mosher tomorrow, Adam Kaplan on Friday. It's brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City.